Hello and welcome to Double Edge in collaboration with The Wire and Wire's MK Venu right here with me. The budget 2017 has just been presented. The question we are asking today is, with the budget's focus on transforming, energizing and cleaning India, and through the themes of farmers, rural population, youth, poor, and an additional and a much stepped up investment or promised investment in infrastructure, where does this all land up, and what is the way forward? More importantly, there are some interesting governance themes. One is, of course, the finance minister's focus on, or in actually saluting the taxpayer and saying that and acknowledging that India is a land of uncompliant taxpayers. The other is, for the first time, new rules and approaches to actually to political donations. So the question we are trying to ask and pose today is, can change in the nature of political funding, reducing caps, making sure that people are paying lower amounts, can it change the nature of political funding? So that's one big question. The second, of course, is the social sector spending that we are talking about, and how is that going to play out? Is all this increased outlay that we've seen in the budget, is that likely to transform into something genuine and real on ground, at least in contrast to previous years? So Venu, let's start off with the first one. Right? So we'll cash cap for political funding from 20,000 rupees in cash to 2,000 rupees. What could it do?
See, Govind, I have not seen the details in regard to, in my view, the real issue is not whether it's 20,000 or 2,000. It may be even 1,000. The real issue is that you do not know the source of these funds. So today, as the law stands today, political parties, if they get some, say, black money from somewhere, say 10 crores, they find it very easy to split the 10 crores into units of 20,000 each.
Right, yeah.
Now, no questions asked, right? And this one question that we were all asking during demonetization: what are these parties doing with their 1,000 and 500 rupee notes, right? Yeah. Which they have in the form of these multiple millions of 20,000 rupee. So in 2000, that issue doesn't get resolved.
Yeah.
Merely by reducing the limit, you may make it a little more difficult for them to manage it. But the fundamental issue of disclosing the source remains. And on the other hand, parties are not agreeing to RTI, bringing political parties under RTI, so that at least you can send a question and inquire about it and find out, no, they're not going to voluntarily declare who these people are.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be fixed. And it's a positive step, but it's not substantive enough.
Okay, but why do you think that this step? I mean, maybe it could have been more substantive, but this step is responding to public criticism. I mean, is it a sign that this government is saying, okay, people are talking about this issue, they've been chasing us on this, so let us at least come with some kind of framework which addresses it or seems to address it.
Clearly, it's responding to public criticism, but it's important to remember when did this criticism begin? It began after Prime Minister Modi announced demonetization.
Right.
Then people start raising questions about why start with the poor people.
Yeah.
Why don't political parties fix the ecosystem of corrupt ecosystem of the political funding, where big business nexus with the political parties is very, very well known. It's all done in a very murky way. So if you remember, after demonetization, within a few days or within a week, Mr. Modi, when Parliament began, he announced, yes, we should think about state funding of elections. So far, Mr. Modi has merely been saying all the political parties should come together and think about these things. Now, if you really intend to sort of fix it, you could have announced in the budget, okay, state funding, let's do something about state funding. Let's think of other mechanisms whereby corporate India can directly give money to the election commission, and election commission creates a fund based on certain norms. In my view, the big problem is when corporates directly deal with political parties, the quid pro quo gets established. So if you can cut that link, and if an election fund is created under the administration of the election commission and done transparently, I think that will go a long way in solving the problem. Taxpayers also wouldn't mind paying for cleaning up the system. More than that, you can even ask businesses to contribute a small part of their maybe turnover or profits towards political funding. If you ask the top maybe 5,000 companies, they may come forward and do it as a one-time thing, so that they're not harassed by politicians again and again. Today the problem is corporates. Some corporates genuinely feel that they get feelers from politicians all the time. India has all round elections happening all the year, round the year. Assembly here, corporation there, general elections. Of
course. Let's the transparency in political funding and bringing about greater transparency.
This doesn't bring transparency.
Exactly. No. So, to what extent would you say is this how big is the problem of transparency in funding in itself, in context of all the other problems we face when it comes to, let's say, the lack of transparency in this country? When it comes, it could be in any area.
Yeah. In the sense,
or how important is it an issue that we need to fix?
See, as I said, straight off, if it's the nexus between business and politics that creates this entire quid pro quo ecosystem where we saw how natural resources, the way they whether it's spectrum or coal, the last general elections were fought on corruption, scams in coal and spectrum. Now all those were clearly linked to business houses which had given money to politicians through the back door, non-transparent, and governments under pressure to sort of deliver favors to them out of turn allotments of resources. Now,
so that's big ticket corruption.
That's big ticket, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you saying that big ticket corruption, if you want to tackle in this country, this is something that needs to be fixed?
I actually, going the fish typically rots from the head. If this big ticket corruption had been addressed first by this government, and then they'd gone for, and then they'd done GST, digitization, and then demonetization, that would have been a much better sequencing, because that really sends the signal. The big signal comes from big ticket. So I think they should have done that first.
Okay.
But the order is reversed now.
Okay, great. So let's talk about some of the other social sector promises, right? So the budget has obviously raised allocations across the board for rural India, for infrastructure, for farmers, for a whole bunch of schemes. What's your takeaway, or what's your presiding view?
My sense, Govind, is that in relation to promises made by Prime Minister Modi and this government when they came to power, on various segments of social sector, there's still huge underfunding. They for instance, they said housing for all by 2022. They're talking about some 20 million now. Now there is no blueprint for it. They're merely sort of talking about interest subvention. There is something in this budget about banks giving loans. Now, but where is the basic plan for housing for all? I don't see it. Then they talked about massive har khet ko pani, creating irrigation infrastructure for farmers, doubling farmers' income by 2022. I don't see that. And health and infrastructure, health and education, we all know highly underfunded. India is barely 1.3% of GDP, way below comparable emerging economies, developing economies. So I don't see, and in the present context, this budget, there was a huge expectation that the people who had suffered, and the Prime Minister had clearly stated that he would want the rich, the financial market players to maybe pay a little more to elevate the plight of the poor who had suffered in the informal sector, farmers. Nothing came. So there was some talk of universal basic income. It is still in a kind of discussion mode,
Isn't that just as well? Because there's, there's no money to pay for it right now.
I know, but they had raised expectations. So forget about, universal basic income needs much more debate, restructuring of subsidies, etc. But there was a feeling that among the poor that the PM has assured us some temporary relief. So that temporary relief hasn't come, in my view.
Right. So if you were to, do a final takeaway, so we talked about electoral funding, because that from a governance point of view seems to be that at least talking about the disparity in income tax payments, or how we are a nation of non-tax compliance. So there seems to be some steps on governance, at least attempted. Here there are some steps to do with trying to fix, let's say, Narega, therefore maybe trying to balance out the lag effects of demonetization. So what are the 3 or 4 themes that you're taking away?
Well,
and in terms of what's worked, maybe something has worked, and what's clearly not.
See, in my view, what has worked in this budget is that a lot of negative news which had got built into the
right, and exactly why the markets were cheering as well.
Yeah, inheritance tax, long-term capital gains tax. In fact, the markets doesn't like universal basic income, or markets even don't like farm loan waiver, which in a political economy like ours is required from time to time. We have industrialists who owe 10 lakh crores. There are problem assets of 10 lakh crores. Nobody talks about the ethics or morality of that. The market players constantly talk about fixing that problem, but they don't talk about when farmers get some loan waiver, there's a lot of alarm is raised that fiscal deficit is being roadmap being thrown out of the window. So there is a certain bias. So in my view, the government has plans, and they are showing the people a kind of 5-year roadmap in terms of housing for all, health for all, but on the ground. I don't see enough funding, and I've seen your own India Spend figures, which have from time to time indicates a lot of underfunding of all these social sector projects in relation to what Mr. Modi had promised. So they'll have to take care of that.
Right.
So as 2019 comes closer, I don't know what will happen in UP. I don't think in UP BJP can go and really claim that we have done so much to alleviate people's temporary pain. I don't think there is. But in relation to 2019, they could do. They are indicating some things. Let us see whether they come.
Right. So to sum up and to sort of go towards conclusion, you're saying that there is some sense of vision for the medium to long term, but not much to show for the short term, and that is something that people are expecting or were expecting.
Yeah.
I mean, surely companies were expecting something in the nature which would spur investment or spur consumption.
In fact, some companies, Govind, I heard, for instance, Mahindra, the CEO of Mahindra, who basically sell mostly to rural India, they were hoping that the government would do something to spur consumption demand, which means some income transfer to people, so that buying in rural India will go up. So they were lamenting.
Do you think that the reduction of tax rates, 10 to 5%, 2.5 to 5 lakhs?
But that affects a very small component of taxpayers.
Right.
Whereas the bulk of the people who've been hit by demonetization are outside.
Nowhere in this.
Nowhere in the outside the tax net.
Yeah.
And they are people who earn less than 100 rupees a day. That kind of.
So you're saying people really below poverty line. And
Like the socio-economic caste survey says that there are 90% of Indians are those belong to families where the highest income earner has less than 100 rupees a day. So you can imagine, these guys won't be in the tax net.
Right. Right. So you're saying, so therefore, at least if you were to now look forward, not that you can put out another budget, but what could the government be doing, or should it be thinking of doing to maybe try and correct some of these steps or perhaps missteps, as you see?
I find, Govind, philosophically, I have a deep problem with the way this government is describing the informal sector and trying to coerce the informal sector to come into this grand, standardized, digitized income tax or excise paying world, which they deem as ethical. And I have a basic problem with it, because the informal sector also has its own ethics.
Yes.
They may avoid the gaze of the excise inspector or the labor inspector, but I think, in my view, they are far more honest in the way they operate. And you are trying to knock them, and push them into the formal sector as if they're all chores, And if you see the state institutions and their interface with the formal sector companies, we all know how ethical they are. So I have this philosophical problem with the way this government looks at the informal sector, and the way they are. One of the big issues which I speak to market people in Bombay, they're saying that it depends how the way informal sector is made to transit into the formal sector, because they work on very low margins, and if they are pushed into it, they'll wind up.
Because their business model comes under
pressure, and there'll be more unemployment.
Yeah.
So that sensitivity to me seems to be missing, and which Dr. Reddy, I spoke to the former RBI governor, and he put it brilliantly. He said the informal sector works at least 30% of the working capital, small companies. It comes from parallel cash economy. Now, this government has to show, Dr. Reddy says, banks have to show sensitivity in re-lubricating, that 30% working capital. Otherwise, they'll all fold up. And obviously, the organized sector will have a field day. They'll go and take away that market. and people will end up paying more because they have higher costs.
Right.
That's what will happen. Yeah.
Right. We've run out of time. Thank you, and look forward to more of these discussions in collaboration between the boom and the wire.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all we have time for on the Double Edge from the boom. We're going to be back with Venu and the wire very soon. Stay with us.